Hello, guys, and welcome to another Legendary Ladies podcast. And today we're talking about a show I feel like it's the only thing I'm ever hearing anyone talk about, which is X-Men 92. And for the longest time, I
97.
knew 97. You're right. Which one do I
It's
have
right.
90? I have 92 in my little thing, so that's probably why. But X-Men 97, you're correct. But yeah, this is a show everyone's been talking about. It's based on the 1990s cartoon. And it's a show that I haven't had time to watch. And then one of my friends who's not as big of an X-Men fan is like, hey, you got to really sit down and watch this. Let's watch it together. I was like, oh yeah, I really should be watching this. So we'll talk about if we continue watching it or not. But it's a continuation, but also kind of new watcher friendly all at the same time. It's like a new era of X-Men. But if you guys don't know about the 90s cartoon was very, very followed the storytelling structure of the X-Men comics, but also took a lot of the darker X-Men comics and then made it for a cartoon, which at that time, superhero shows and cartoons, they just saw it as Saturday morning cartoons. Here's a silly thing you're watching, but then, it could explore stuff like the Phoenix Saga. I know you and me grew up on X-Men Evolution, though. So, Amy, why don't you talk a little bit about your X-Men background?
So I got introduced to X-Men kind of in it would just happen to be the show I was watching in the background on Saturday mornings, I like the X-Men movies, those original ones with Patrick Stewart, like way back in the day. That was kind of my first introduction into the X-Men world, and I never really ended up reading the comics. I still haven't. But
there's a lot to catch up on, so I can understand.
I think, and that was the problem. It was a little overwhelming for me, and I knew the characters from X-Men Evolution. I knew the characters from those movies, but whenever I started reading a comic, I was like, oh my God, there's so many new characters. They have so many powers. Like, I'm having trouble keeping up with the lore, with the history, with the bad guys. I'm like, I know Magneto. I know he's a bad guy, but like this was my first introduction to Sentinel, so I thought that was really interesting. I'm like, obviously, I know that this is a major player in.
I think they were in X-Men Evolution a little bit, but towards the end. Yeah.
I think they were too, and I remember that I don't know if I ever finished X-Men Evolution.
And it got so good in the end.
I know, but I definitely, like, full disclosure, you guys should know this about me by now. I'm here for the rom-com or like romantic moments of the stories. I was a huge Jean Grey, Scott Summers girl. Like, I was into that stuff. So like X-Men Evolution, man, that was my jam. All of their like, I can't control my powers, I can help you do that. Like that always was my vibe. And so I really enjoyed those characters, so I enjoyed seeing that in this one. But we'll get into this in a little bit. I actually didn't realize until you brought this up. When I was at WonderCon, everybody was talking about X-Men 97. I thought it was like some big reunion thing. I thought it was like some sort of celebration about X-Men, which realistically, now that I'm thinking about it, the timing wouldn't have worked. There wouldn't have been like, it wasn't, we're celebrating our 30th reunion or anything. I thought like maybe it was just a big comic book had come out and they were doing a big reunion and they happened to get writers together. Like, everybody was talking about it and I didn't bother think of actually doing the research or asking what it was. So I did not realize that this is a new series that only has one season, that this is like at WonderCon, it would have been super fresh in everybody's mind. So I'm now glad that I've learned that, because I am now knee deep in it. I love it. The animation style was the very like classic nostalgia style. I was like, this is really interesting because it's very comforting nostalgia style. There's always something, that kind of comic book style of that old school nostalgia, that was never my comic book style. I always liked that really hyper detail style of like I will pick up the Hush comic from Batman.
Right. It's a good marriage of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is right in the middle. This is like kind of the animation feels clean and crisp, but has those very clear lines and the very clear comic booky feel to it and the paper turner feel to it. So I really liked stepping into this. You've read all the comics, right?
I mean, it's impossible to read every single X-Men comic, but yeah, I've been reading X-Men, since I was a kid and doing that on a weekly basis. So I know a lot about X-Men. And that's why my friend was like, hey, you should watch this because there's references I won't get, but you will. Like a good example, at least in the pilot, is that they reference this character Gold Balls. And he's a character that's such a throwaway from like 10 years ago from Brian Michael Bendis's run, where it's this guy who makes gold balls. And everyone said this is the most ridiculous character ever. Why does he exist? And he kind of became like a butt of a joke. So to see a modern character, like again, he was probably introduced in the 2010s, be referenced in a 1990s show, I thought was really cool. So yeah, if you're an X-Men fan, they definitely get some deep cuts here already from the pilot standpoint. But I agree, the animation is, I think, what really grabbed me because it has an old-timey feel, but also feels modern and crisp. And, something that I think has been missing from what we call the Krakoa age of X-Men. So to tell you guys what's going on in X-Men right now, and they are changing it up. They're going back to the original stuff by like August. But for the past like 5 years, there's been something called Krakoa, where the X-Men decided, and they're going to be playing a big part in this X-Men 97 show. The X-Men decided, okay, humans, you hate us. We're going to go to our own utopia and have this own island. And we have all these resources that you need to be alive forever. And we're not going to give it to you. So that's the Krakoan age. And it's been going on for 5 years. And, there's aspects that are interesting mythology wise. But for me, it kind of takes away the soap opera-ness of the X-Men that I know and love. What you've found from Chris Claremont's run, which is what is based on the 97 shows, like Chris Claremont's run.
The sort of like political dichotomy and that struggle of humans versus mutants. And I think like that's always been a core of X-Men stories. And I mean, those are the stories that I'm used to telling. Those are the conflicts that I'm used to knowing. And even though it doesn't, it doesn't feel repetitive, because that story is always evolving, because the concept of I feel like I don't belong in this world is a constant struggle for every human at every moment. There is always going to be someone who doesn't feel like they belong. And what is it like then to be in a place where you do feel like you belong, or when everybody else feels prejudiced against you? Like that is just a global universal concept that fits itself well into X-Men. So it's interesting that they would, what you're describing, when they kind of get rid of that factor. I can see them wanting to branch out, but I could definitely see how maybe it feels like it's missing something.
I think almost, because what was interesting about this is that kind of gray area of the politics, where it's just like you understand where the mutants are coming from, you don't understand where the humans are coming from, but it's this really interesting conflict. And I think with the Krakoa age is more of, you still have the political aspect, but it was more heightened because they're like godlike creatures, right? Because the X-Men's also like, we are like you. Sure, we have these powers, but that doesn't make us any less human. And this current age is like, we're better than everybody else. Let's play along with this. So yeah, I think it was kind of cool because of where we are in the X-Men comics too. What they're trying to explore is, again, this nostalgic, idea. But through a modern lens. Like you could tell stories that you're continuing from where that series left off, but from a 2024 mind frame, which I really, really liked about this. And, and we'll talk about it, a big topic is, was it worth the hype? I think all I've heard, and again, I haven't gone past episode 1, not out of, because I disliked it, just because of timing, and I will finish it. But it was interesting that a lot of people were like, yeah, it's a little bit of a slow burn until you get episode 5 and everything changes and it doesn't let up. And I think that's interesting from a show that actually was released episode by episode. Sure, it's a streaming show, but they kind of like took their time and they didn't care. They're like, yeah, we know we're releasing this episode by episode, but stay for the ride.
It's refreshing in a day and time and era in which we release everything at once. And it's almost like we were just talking about, we're going to be watching Bridgerton. Bridgerton is like, we can't do episode by episode, but we're still going to do half the season. Like we're going to find a way to sort of work that in there. I like series that trust their audience, that trust that the audience is going to be in for the long haul. And so I've only watched the pilot. I literally finished it 27 minutes ago. But I'm definitely going to watch more. You said you've seen episodes 1 through 4?
No, I've only seen episode 1, so I'm also in the same. I just know that because I've heard so many people talking about it. Episodes 1 through 4, it's like, yeah, this is a great show. But then episode 5 is where everything changes. You're like, this is a great show.
Which is the benefit and joy of having an audience that you can communicate with. Like, it's nice that we have such an easy way to talk to each other and communicate through social media and friends, and having a community like that where they're like, hey, it's good, but then it gets really good. Like, just stick with it. I
But it's
like
also
that
an
kind of stuff. I'm
IP.
totally okay with that.
But it's also an IP that people trust, so it's a little easier in that regard to two
Yeah.
sides, right? There's the IP idea of it's the X-Men, we like the X-Men, but then B, it's a show that people really, really liked, so they want to follow it. So obviously also this nostalgic aspect where you can take your time because people kind of trust you. Because like, let's say it is a new show, let's just call it the Men of X, right? And you're just like, oh, I don't know how to feel about this kind of a slow pilot, because it was slow, but not, I think in any other show, it wasn't slow, because I give you an idea what the pilot is. It does pick up from, again, where the show left off. You get to see Jean's pregnant. You get to see Cyclops and Jean try and make the decision, are we going to leave the team or not? And the team kind of reacting to that. But then the end, Professor Xavier is dead, and Magneto comes in and says, hey, I own the school now. So already that is an interesting cliffhanger for me. Even if I didn't know episode 5 is crazy, I'm like, well, that interests me as someone who's an X-Men fan. Magneto's a cool character. Is he overdone? Maybe. But the way you present him here it's very much back to basics, but in a new way. It's like he is running the school now. So what does that look like? This villain, not villain, but this anti-hero that has a lot of different opinions than Professor Xavier.
Now, the animated series, if this picks up where the animated series left off, there's two things that I want to talk about with that. The first is I don't know what happened in the animated series. So what does the animated series actually, does it end or is it canceled?
So I also watched maybe episodes here and there. I just know that show ended with the Dark Phoenix saga, but I don't really know.
Oh, okay.
Like they did Phoenix, that I know. Because that was a big
Jean.
part with Jean. Yeah.
Interesting.
That I know. Other than that, it wasn't my show, which is interesting why I'm liking this, because I didn't really like the 90s one as much as someone who didn't grow up with it.
Well, and that's the second part of the conversation, is that it didn't feel slow to me at all, because I felt like I was catching up. Like there was, because I didn't know the history of what had happened, I only knew I knew most of the characters, but like I didn't know Morph.
Right,
I didn't know Jubilee. So
you did not know Jubilee. That's interesting.
I think I did in passing. I had never she had never become a main character in my head. So this was nice for me to get an intro where they clearly dropped a lot of, and this, remember when this happened because of this? And I was okay with that. It felt very natural. And for me, as someone who was hopping into this with a little bit of history of X-Men and, a genuine passion for it, care for it, like it felt fast enough for me. It didn't feel slow. It felt like it was well paced to get me kind of back into it. I think a person who was coming in completely blind, which honestly, I feel like that would be hard to do in X-Men. I feel like you would have to work really hard to come in completely blind to X-Men. It's kind of like if someone decided to come in completely blind to Star Wars, you know who Han Solo is, you know who Luke Skywalker is. So unless they're kids, like I feel like it'd be hard for an adult to come in not knowing just a little bit about X-Men. That may be an interesting statement because I'm such a nerdy girl. I grew up in this community, but maybe there are people who have no idea who Cyclops are. But I feel like
that's really hard. Jubilee, I can understand.
Hard.
I feel like obviously you didn't know who Jubilee was, but like even if I wasn't as attracted to them. Yeah, you know who Gambit is. I didn't watch the 90s show that much, but like the Jubilee joke I kind of knew. But yeah, Cyclops, you say Professor X. I mean, even if you don't know Cyclops, you gotta know who Professor X is. Yeah. Like it's just a reference
to
it's like
phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you didn't watch the movies, you really would have to be living under a rock if you didn't know who that was. But I also feel like I'm curious to see. There's a big question with X-Men 97 of like, oh, finally Marvel's back, right? Because Marvel's had a lot of hiccups. So now it's like, okay, Marvel's back. What do you do with that? Are they focusing on just animation for because the TV shows, if we look at it, WandaVision was great. Everyone was talking bad. It's like, whoa, you're starting this. And then, Captain America was just okay for people. So you're like, okay. And then you had another show right away. I'm like, all right, put the brakes. And once you got to She-Hulk, who was watching it? And then you do have Daredevil coming back, and they're working on nostalgia, right? Because the X-Men 97, you had the built-in fan base. Daredevil has a huge built-in fan base because of the Netflix show. So I think it's interesting the way they're leaning back in is maybe not the Miss Marvels and the She-Hulk's characters, people don't know as much about, but leaning into here, you love Daredevil, go check it out. And, I hope we get to see that with other characters too, maybe in animation, maybe not, but like Spider-Man, I love Spider-Man. I want to see more of him utilized. But then also, as those shows were getting less interesting to people, the one show I feel like a lot of people were still kind of talking about was What If, just because of the animation and it was easy to jump into. I know a lot of people liked Loki as a show, but again, had a built-in fan base. People really liked the character.
And this one taps into the nostalgia unashamedly. They literally call it X-Men 97. Like,
Sure.
this is meant to tap into multiple different generations. And we've talked before about the challenges with pilots or music music albums or TV shows where we can never really figure out who their audience was. And I think this is one of those shows that is genuinely made for everybody. It is meant to be for the people
Not
who
just
watch the
nostalgic
animated
people.
series. Exactly. It's meant to be for people like me who enjoy X-Men, but probably couldn't name more than 10, 15 characters, without having to really think about it. Or someone who is, a 10-year-old kid whose parents like, hey, I'm going to watch this. You want to watch this too? And they're like, wow, this is really entertaining. I like this. And I really hope that it inspires kids then to want to look into it more. I hope that, like me, I'm definitely going to keep watching because I want to know the story. But now I want to go back and watch the animated series because now I'm curious about the Dark Phoenix saga because now we've got the Jean Grey situation right now where she seems okay, but I want to know what happened with the Dark Phoenix sitch. So I think I think there's a good point here where this was built for every audience, and I think it does a good job of establishing itself. I could imagine someone who was like a massive X-Men fan might have been like, oh, they keep telling everybody what's going on, but you kind of have to. It's unavoidable in this kind of an episode. You have 30 minutes. You need to make sure everybody understands what everybody's powers are, but they don't even necessarily do that. They kind of ask you to figure it out, which is a question I have. This is something that I never dived into, and I always just was like, okay, yeah, sure. What are Rogue's? I know what her powers are, but when she is like, for instance, flying down, like the plane explodes and they're falling down, and she can suddenly fly. How did that happen? Did she like?
She just
Does
pretty
she
much
like?
takes it. Yeah, I mean,
But
she
doesn't she have
takes
to have
those
physical
powers.
contact?
She does, yeah. That's pretty much it. And there's depending on the versions, depending where she's at, there's times where she could like control 3 powers at once. But then also
Okay.
like that's a little overpowering. So they'll be like, you can only do one, and that's why they did the touch things. Like, oh, you touch people, and that's why you can't touch people. That makes you weak, or
Yeah.
because it is kind of an overpowered power, right? She
Yeah.
touches things like, oh my god, I have your power now. So I think it's out of convenience. It depends on what you're trying to play with, but most of the time it's like, oh, I have maybe like 2 or 3 powers I remember because these are the last people I touched and I can utilize
And is
those
it that kind
powers.
of thing where she can keep it for an extended period of time so she like powers up before the start of every like mission,
Yeah.
so to speak?
I don't from what that's what I would think is the baseline. Maybe the baseline's 1 power, but from what I've seen in the past, it's been like 2 or 3 powers that she could use at the same
Okay.
time.
Because literally, like, they're falling out of the airplane, and Nerd Me went back and watched it 2 times. I was like, okay, it looks like she's taken a flying power so she can take Storm's powers, and they, like, lock eyes together, and I was like, oh, maybe she, like, boop, they grabbed her powers for just a second, but they don't touch as they're falling out of the sky. And
I think it's
I
because
went
she
back
probably
and watched
had
a couple
touched
times.
her previously, so like she has
So,
that power from a
okay.
previous thing.
So that makes sense if canonically that's just something that she does before every major mission. She's like, and today's winners are you, and you. You guys get to give me your powers.
I think sometimes they're saved in her memories too. Again, it's always
Okay.
something different. So
Okay. I wonder if like it's almost like an hourglass where she has like the sands of the powers and a certain point it's gonna run out. She has to repower it. Okay. Now I'm gonna do a little bit more research into that because that was something I was really curious about. I'm going, okay, well she's coming on these missions and obviously I know what a large character she is in canon, but I was like, logistically, how does this work? So I'm going to explore that a little bit more. But
But yeah,
speaking
the
on the
power.
go ahead.
Go on. Yeah. No.
I
I
was
was just
gonna
gonna say the powers. I was gonna say power sets are interesting, and I think this X-Men
yeah.
team, because that's the whole point of a team, is that you have to have like very interesting powers, and I think they did a good job at trying to get different pieces to, I would say, the full Voltron that they're trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
What were we gonna
Yeah.
ask?
Well, no, it does seem a little bit heavy on the like energy powers because you've got
Mm.
Scott's powers and then you've got Jubilee's energy powers, and Bishop can absorb and then redirect that energy. So it seems a little heavy on the energy powers, but I really liked the ability that we saw with Jean's powers, that we actually got a chance to see her using
And
her
she's known as an Omega mutant. She's like one of the most powerful mutants. So,
that's what I was going to ask about next. Is you've
mm.
got her, and then you've got Storm, who straight up, just rips them all
Right.
apart.
Also a strong
So
mutant.
explain that Omega power, because the Sentinels Omega power detected. They bring it up. So explain that to me.
Most of the time, it's people who have Jean's power. So, like Professor X is an Omega leveled X Men. Emma Frost is an Omega leveled X Men.
Really
Most of the time,
interesting.
it's people who are telepaths. That you could be a certain level of a telepath, and then the highest telepath and the most strongest mutant is, like Professor X and Jean Grey, because of
Hmm.
this. Because also Cerebro is used by their power. So like that helmet they put on is only used for people who,
Yeah,
or at least originally was only used for people who have those powers.
yeah, and I know like it's in this one they qualify Storm as that. Um, do you know any other? Are there any other characters on the team right now that they qualify as Omega?
I didn't even know Storm was one. I just knew Jean
They
was.
say
I
it.
mean, Storm makes
Yeah.
sense that she'd be one.
I watched it with captions because I'm officially an old person.
I feel like everyone I know watches things on captions.
It's so helpful. It's like when you read a book and listen to the audiobook at the same time. It helps your
That I've
brain.
never done that one before.
I've
I
also
have to
never
try
done
it
that
out.
because I don't advise it. Not if
It's a
you read
little bit,
fast like me.
yeah, sensory
It's
overload.
like when you read music, you actually learn to read ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
which is kind of wild. It's if you as an adult, I've looked back on that skill and I realize how often I use it. I use it when I'm cold
Sure.
reading scripts or I'm given scenes or even Shakespeare stuff that I'm cold reading that I've never read before. I am literally actually my brain physically is reading a line and a half ahead of time. And
Wow.
it's kind of
It's a good
wild to
skill.
think because in music you learn that you actually learn to read ahead of time so that your brain knows what's coming so that you can get the fingerings on, in my case, the flute or the piano. Or same when you're sight reading music. Like it's not a skill you even really know that you've learned until you're like, oh, I think this is something I'm doing. But when I'm reading a book, it's actually something I have to force myself to stop doing because I'm reading the book so fast that I'm enjoying the most. I often read this is so weird. I often more scenes that
I think you're cutting out a little bit now,
I'm
Amy. Amy, you're cutting out a little bit. You were good for a second, and now you're cutting out. Still cutting out a little bit.
oh, oh, it's definitely StreamYard, a good signal. I'm through my 5G uh oh no.
You're good now.
Oh, we're good?
Yeah,
How
yeah,
weird,
yeah.
StreamYard. StreamYard's not reading ahead. StreamYard's lagging behind.
It's definitely lagging
Saying that I
behind.
often is it good now though? We're good?
Now you're good, yeah.
Okay. Um I I will read books out loud to myself because it forces me to slow down. um I don't know how I got on this tangent. I don't know what we were talking about before this. Do you?
We were talking about captions. We were talking about closed
Oh,
captions. I remember
yes,
us
captions. So
going
I
back
read
to
with
that.
captions. I think it helps me slow down and pay any whatever. The captions in the episode said she was an Omega powered um mutant. So they did qualify that. Can you give me a little bit of a history and understanding on Sentinel?
Yeah, pretty much the log line is that they are machines built to kill mutants. That's pretty much it. The William Stryker. I always call him William Stryker because of X-Men Evolution, but they call him something else here. But Stryker, he's the guy, he's the human who's the baddest guy around. And he's like, let's kill all mutants. And he created those machines. And it's just, that's what they do. They try to kill mutants.
Then what is this? Is this what they call it? Master Mold? Is that an in-canon character or is that something created for this?
Yes, it is. It's a
Like a
bigger version
boss?
of the Sentinel. Yeah. It's like the boss level of the Sentinel.
So do you think they successfully destroyed that in this episode, or is this going to be a recurring issue?
I think it's going to be a recurring because again, the Sentinels are such a big part, and Stryker seems to be such a big part that I'm sure we'll get a little bit more of that. Again, I don't know where the season is going, but if Magneto is at the center and he's like humans are bad, I think we're going to get a lot more of humans are bad. You know?
Yeah. So that's, which is interesting because it makes sense in the character of Charles Xavier to intentionally leave behind his school and his legacy,
Sure. Teach him a
hoping that
lesson.
that changes Magneto's mind.
Yeah.
And hoping that he goes, okay, well, when you learn how many people here are willing to fight for humans, this is going to force you to do that. But you're talking about a character that canonically, they've tried to do this with before. They have many times tried to convince Magneto to get on this right side, but he has a level of prejudice that just very often cannot be swayed. And so I think
Sure.
it would be very, very, very difficult for this to be successful. I'm the nerd who is not convinced Professor X is dead.
Sure.
So
No one's dead in comics.
no one's dead in comics. There's a huge part of me that wonders if all of this is somehow a ploy or a plot, or if he is dead, sort of like he somehow comes back to life, or he is not technically dead, but then he quote stays dead so that he can see what happens without him, kind of like a person who is undercover cop or whatever. They quote get killed and they stay dead, but then they go to their own funeral to see what happens. So it's one of those things, like what would happen if I was dead, like if this is just some sort of giant experiment. I don't know. I'm curious to see how this goes. I liked that. I liked Magneto showing up and being like, "Hi." So I know we're not friends, but
it's also hard to tell because we only saw him then, like, right? We never really saw what else he's playing with. So it's gonna. I'm sure the next episode and the next episode of that we're gonna find out what is Magneto's motives.
It definitely. I don't know if you caught, and this is the captions thing. I'm sure you did. It was a cool line where Scott says, "My X-Men." And then later on at the end of the episode, Magneto says, "My X-Men." And I was like, oh, boy,
the last line.
Hold on. These ain't your X-Men.
And that's such
so good.
And that's such a cool little twist. I think that's the idea of that, it's a concept we've seen, the idea of Magneto taking over the X-Men. It's a concept we understand and could happen, but it's not something you've actually seen happen in this way. So it's just like, oh, that's really cool. Let's see how this plays out. So it's just a cool little cliffhanger. Again, it's such a small thing, but it's like, oh, I'm ready to see, because again, it doesn't feel like the same old is kind of what you're saying earlier. It's like, oh, I've seen the X-Men before. Why do I need to watch this? And they prove time and time again, this is a new type of X-Men that you haven't seen before, but it's not so new that it doesn't feel familiar. So I think that's why it's caught such fire and why it's been worth the hype is, again, how do you make everyone happy? They do a dang good job at trying to do so.
Really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a well done episode. It definitely establishes the characters pretty successfully. It also, comes back to that core mission of what are the X-Men doing as far as the school goes and bringing in kids who have their powers, and the story of like, what is it like when you are so unique and so different and you're in a world where those differences are too much, where they're not, they make you feel so segregated and alone. Like, what is it like to have people who understand you and can be in that space with you? So I really enjoyed like the conversation between Jubilee and name of character with solar powers who I cannot remember who speaks Portuguese. Is that
Sunspot.
what his name becomes?
Yeah. Oh, I
Um,
realized they didn't actually say it there, but yeah,
no,
Sunspot.
I think his name is Rodrigo or something like that. He's Portuguese according to the captions. Um, but yeah, anyway, I'm really excited to see where it goes. I'm definitely going to watch the next episode. Are you?
Yeah,
You're
oh yeah. No,
definitely, yeah.
I'm next time I like sit down for a television show, that's gonna be it. I want to
Mm-hmm.
see where this
Yeah.
episode 5 goes. I want to see where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also in axing what you want to see for the future, but like I hear there's other X-Men characters that show up. I'm a huge Emma Frost fan, and I know she plays a part. So I always rooting to see if Kitty Pryde's gonna show up anywhere. I don't think she shows up
Love
in
Kitty.
this season, but I'd be like, oh, I'd
Not
love to
yet.
see Kitty. No, not yet. There was a pilot,
Yeah,
which was
I love Kitty.
yeah, no, she's such a fun character. And there was a show called like Pride of the X-Men that lasted like one episode. And it was around this time. So I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to see Kitty. But Jubilee really
Yeah.
plays the Kitty Pryde characters. That's why you won't see her right now, is because they are similar characters. So they're like, oh, why would I bring in Kitty Pryde if we have Jubilee? They're just very similar characters. But yeah, I want to see who shows up. I want to see the twists and turns, obviously, because I haven't been spoiled by any of the twists and turns.
Yeah, me neither.
I know maybe like one or two things, but not the big twists. So I'm excited for that. And it's also short, man. I love a good short show. So
I'm excited too. I'm definitely gonna watch it. I am in like full memorizing mode for my new Shakespeare show. Because I have learned over the course of the last year that memorizing is my Achilles heel. That it's a big challenge for me.
Especially for Shakespeare, that's a difficult one.
Well, and some people, it is their jam. Some people, man, that's great for them. But it has been a problem with me since I was young doing any sort of memorizing music or whatever. I can do the idea of the phrase like that. That's not the problem. It's the exact wording that's the problem, because sometimes my brain is like, no, but my wording is better.
Sure.
You can't do that with Shakespeare. His wording is in fact better. So I am in like full memorizing mode for the next 2 days for sure. But then like beyond that, that is my focus. That and Bridgerton, man. So I will get to X-Men shortly, which I am very excited about. The problem is, and actually you bring up a good point, I've not been spoiled about X-Men at all.
You don't want to be.
About 40, it's been about 36 hours, and there are clips everywhere on my Instagram about Bridgerton. I cannot turn it on because my Instagram algorithm knows I am a romance girly.
Not as much X-Men.
All these moments. Yeah, apparently not. That's what I need to do then, is change the algorithm. It is funny to see how your algorithm changes. For a hot second there, it was all Chris Pine, horses, and A Court of Thorns and Roses. Which, you know,
yeah, it makes
also
sense.
fantasy girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to dive into this. I am definitely gonna enjoy it, and I signed up for Disney Plus, so I'm gonna use that for a month, and then cancel it. So
it makes sense.
I'm gonna watch everything I can in the next month.
I think X-Men's a good place to start.
Dive into it. Yeah, I think that's probably the main one I'm gonna be working with. Do you have anything else you want to share about the episode? I thought it was really well done. I really enjoyed it. I'm, again, a Jean Grey, Scott Summers girly, so I
never have been, so that's part I'm like, oh, because I love Emma Frost as an Emma Frost gal. Never liked Cyclops. Never enjoyed him as a character, or Jean. I think Jean's a really cool, like, historical character. Like, I think she does a lot for the X-Men. I don't like them as people.
That's so funny because I love them. And
so
I also, I know Logan is like,
Logan's my boy.
He drove me nuts this episode. I was like, can you not be an asshole?
I don't think they showed the best of Logan in this episode in particular, but no, I like that because he's rough around the edges, but he's a soft teddy bear. That's what we love about Logan.
He's a soft teddy bear for Jean Grey, which we know is an issue.
There's not even love triangles. There's love like octagons when it comes to Cyclops and Jean Grey, because you got Wolverine, Madeline Pryor was related to Jean. You have Emma. There's a lot of different people that could enter this.
Is there an Emma Frost Scott Summers thing?
Yeah, that's why Emma Frost.
Know this?
Yeah. He cheated on Jean with Emma. This is a soap
Scott.
opera. I know. I think it was like
now,
by accident. I don't remember the details, but they did. Yeah, Emma and Scott definitely have a thing.
Okay, but now that is, I have seen those storylines where you have like the two characters who are in love, and then because of the powers or the science, they find a way to manipulate the guy into accidentally cheating, and then that leads to a whole "but you should have known it wasn't me" storyline, and I dig those storylines. I love that drama. Oh, I love it. Anyway, I'm excited to see where things go. I think Jean Grey's vision that she saw is pretty profound. The only thing I will say in this episode that made me go, "Ooh," was the baby animation a little freaky to you? The baby looked too old to be a baby. It looked like an adult face on a baby, and I'm sure that was just the animation, but I'm also not sure if that was part of the vision. And it could be.
I'll give you a little bit of a teaser. Like, their baby is known for being like in the future and time traveling, which is Nathan Summers. He's Cable. He is just a known time traveler, so maybe they did it on purpose. He's known more as being an adult than a baby.
Then that could fit, because the face looked like an adult, and it freaked me out. So that could be an Easter egg that I accidentally discovered that's actually true. Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, Cable and Bishop, they have like a thing that, not a thing, but they don't like each other. So, but the Scott Summers and Jean Grey family tree is very long, and most of the time has to do with time travel. So, but yeah, no, I'll be watching it. I'm excited to get going with it. So we will see. But we'll start wrapping up. Next week, we're going to be doing Bridgerton, as we talked about. I've never seen it, so I'm going to be watching episode 3, episode 1. Season 3, episode 1. Yeah.
Which I'm so excited about. I love this idea. Morgan and I are knee deep into Bridgerton. This is our jam. It is not only not Kat's jam.
No.
She has no concept of anything.
I don't even know what this show's about. So.
Yeah. Okay, Kat. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you, let me see. I'm going to ask you 3 questions about Bridgerton. And then we're going to see. Yeah. Okay. So question number 1.
Right.
In what country do you think Bridgerton takes place in?
I think England.
Okay. Number 2, in what general time period do you think it takes place in?
1800s.
Okay. And then name any character, a single character in Bridgerton. I'll tell you what, even better yet.
The one for Dairy Girls is in it. And her name's not Claire in this show.
Okay, here we go. This will be fun. There's a point where characters say they're going on a promenade. What is a promenade?
From the promenade in like our actual language, 2 things. I think it's usually like a movie theater, or it's like a town, like a little town square. So going out on the town, I guess.
That's actually not terribly off, going out on the town. I will see if it pops up in the episode. And if it doesn't pop up in the episode, Morgan and I will teach you what the Bridgerton version of a promenade is.
Try to remember those questions, because that's a cliffhanger for this episode for you guys to watch the Bridgerton episode. So.
Yep. I'm trying to think of a better question. Oh, here we go. This is better. Okay. So the time period thing, I'm going to stick with that question because you got the place right, England. But anybody who's seen any sort of trailer, you know where it is. It's in England.
Sure. And
so that one I have to give
the actors.
So the time period, 1800s-ish. That's a huge time period. But
I got the century.
I asked Kat, what's a promenade? And she said they're going out on the town, which is, we'll talk about that. And then the third one, there's a character named Lady Whistledown.
Okay.
I'm sure you've never heard of Lady Whistledown. But just based on the phrase Lady Whistledown, can you guess what this character does?
She's a matchmaker.
I love this. This is going to be so interesting. Okay. I cannot wait, because I'm pretty sure what's funny is I'm pretty sure if it starts the way it always starts, I think Lady Whistledown will open the episode.
Okay.
So you're going to find out pretty quickly who Lady Whistledown is. Except for who Lady Whistledown is actually a major plot point.
Ooh,
so anyway, this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited to watch this. So I think that's going to wrap us up for this one. Anything else you want to throw in?
Not just I actually don't. I have one Kickstarter. I got my detective Kickstarter, Devin and Taylor. If you're looking for reverse engineering of Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys, it's not about the who did it, but why they did it. So go check out that comic. And yeah, we're preparing for our June, which is crazy and busy for Pride Month, and we have our trans anthology coming up. So look forward to that. How about you?
So excited for you guys. I am just now starting rehearsals for Much Ado About Nothing with Shakespeare in the Vines in Temecula, California.
Keeping
It
yourself
runs
busy.
July 11th through the 20th. I am really excited, Kat. We had our first read through on Tuesday. This is a this is an exceptional cast. For a cast that is all volunteers, like this is not a professional. Let me rephrase that. It is like legally, quote unquote, not a professional production because we're not being paid and there's no
Sure.
stipend. It is as close to a professional production for a community theater that you're
I
gonna
wish
get.
it was
This
when we
is
hit during
oh,
Comic Con because so many people will be coming.
it's a week. You just gotta come out a week earlier and stay the
Just
whole week.
gotta stay a whole week in San
Just
Diego.
come a whole week. Oh no, you have to spend an extra week. What's
That's
nice is
true.
that Temecula is actually close enough to Los Angeles that you could then go spend a couple days at Disneyland. I mean, I'm giving you so many options.
That there is a lot of options.
But it's gonna be like we were all kind of sitting there in the read through. We're like, are you feeling this? Because I'm feeling. Are you feeling this? Because this is gonna be really good. So I'm really excited. But yeah, I'll be playing Beatrice, which is she's a really
I thought that
passionate
was
character.
a Bridgerton character name. So
Oh, that's
maybe it
so funny.
is.
Is
I
it?
don't know.
I don't think it is. I don't
Oh
think
man,
there's a Lady Beatrice in
I
it.
felt like it.
There's a
There
Lady
felt
Whistledown, but other than that. All
no
right. But
Beatrice.
yeah, that's what I've got going on. If you guys want tickets, shakespeareinthevines.org. July 11th through 20th, only on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. So there's no matinees and there's no Sunday night performances because it's at a winery as the sun is setting.
Ooh.
Hence the Shakespeare in the Vines. But yeah, you guys should definitely come and see it. And then find me on Instagram, Amy_hip, Amy_HYP. And that's where you can get all the deets about what's going on.
Well, stay legendary. I was like, what do we